Welcome everyone to IsisParenting Sleep Support Webinar and Chat. My name is Nancy Holtzman. I'm a mom and baby nurse educator, board certified lactation consultant, and board certified in pediatrics. I'm here outside of Boston, Massachusetts at IsisParenting's home office, where I oversee the online education and clinical content here at IsisParenting. We have 13 centers in the States. We have 4 centers in the Metro Boston area, 5 centers in Dallas, Fort Worth, and 4 new centers in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you're not near one of those centers, that's okay too, because we have lots of online offerings and we have an online e-store as well. With me today is my friend and colleague, Megan Casano. She is also a registered nurse and mom of 4 beautiful daughters, and she will introduce today's topic, and then we will take some questions from you. So, welcome and thanks for participating.
Thanks, Nancy. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So today's topic, which I understand, Nancy, you were getting some buzz on your Twitter page. Today we're going to talk about a sleep intervention technique that's called intervals or check-ins. I'm going to talk to you about what this is, why some parents choose to do it. I'm actually going to talk to you about how you can do it. So really, one of the things that Nancy and I were saying when we were discussing to do this, if we should do this webinar, and one of the things that I want to make clear right off the bat, and that I will again throughout the webinar if people tune in later, is that, at ISIS, we don't lock families into one particular approach and say there's only one way to help your baby sleep and, improve sleep. We really do, in our personalized sleep consults, it really is a conversation with the family about their parenting styles, and not only that, but the logistics of their family. So, there might be a family who would really love to do something that's super slow and soothing, but for health reasons or work reasons, or the number of children they have, or whatever the case may be, they're simply, some families do just need something that's a little faster. So, we really are open to what each family needs, what each family wants, and we don't lock people into any one particular method. You might hear me say that again because I do just want, I want that to be clear as we're going through this particular approach. So that said, the interval check-in approach is called a lot of different things by a lot of different people. Certainly Dr. Ferber, who's retired now but was Boston-based, is probably the most popular, who coined this. Called progressive waiting, fade, gradual extinction, controlled crying. The premise of these types of plans are pretty much the same. Again, I'm going to describe it to you. But, of course, at ISIS, we always teach parents how to modify it to their comfort level or to sort of the temperament of their baby. If you do, the why some parents would choose an approach like this, frankly, it's faster. And so for a lot of parents, that's really the bottom line, that it does tend to be very effective. It does tend to work pretty quickly. And if you're extremely overtired, you're really suffering, some parents really just need to do something fast. So, if you do feel like, okay, it's time to make a change, my naps are really poor, or my baby's waking up all night and I'm exhausted, you could think about doing an interval or check-in approach. The first in terms of age, when you start this, the earliest you would think about starting this approach with your baby could be about 4 months from due date. Remember, we always count your baby's age in terms of sleep from due date until you get to about 6 months adjusted. And then you can, you don't have to take prematurity into factor anymore. But that means that if you're experiencing bedtime difficulties, you could start this technique at bedtime only, perhaps during the first third of the night, at 4 months from due date. And that's because of the development of the circadian rhythm. by 4 months, that first stretch of the night is organized in all babies. As the night goes on, particularly the second half of the night, that takes longer for the circadian rhythm to come together. And so your expectation for full night consistency really doesn't pop up until more like the 6-month mark. So this approach could be begun as early as 4 months at bedtime. If you wait until a little closer to 5 months, you typically get better, faster results, less erratic results. And by 6 months, you could apply this approach full night. In terms of naps, if you felt like you wanted to use this approach, naps you could start 5.5 to 6 months from due date. If you apply this technique to naps earlier than that, you might be trying to ask your baby to do something that she can't do. She's not ready to, just from a sleep maturation standpoint. So it's really important when you're thinking about using a technique like this, that you really educate yourself about what's fair for your baby, what can your baby achieve, what are you asking your baby to do. And so it might be helpful, if you want to go back and take a look at any of the webinars we've recorded. For example, there's a napping webinar. Of course, we're getting quite a library now, so if you need one-on-one help, we are always happy to walk you through it with a personalized sleep consult as well. If you do choose to do an interval approach, you do want to expect the first 3 days to be quite erratic. Erin likes to say it's like a roller coaster ride. Erin co-leads the sleep team with me. And you might get these extinction bursts, which means, you could feel like, hey, it's been a week, we are on our way, this is great. And then all of a sudden you have a couple bad nights in a row. That's sort of, it's like a testing behavior, particularly with older babies or toddlers. Just sort of this, are you guys, mom and dad, are you really serious about this? And so you might have what feels like a bit of a setback for a couple of nights. And then, you would have to sort of redo some of the work that you may have felt like was finished. That's normal, that happens. But like I said, in general, this is a pretty rapid plan. It can be modified, but most parents within about 7 to 10 days are really well on their way to change. And truthfully, after the first 3 days, you notice big changes. Yeah, I wrote here after the first 4 days, or first 3 days, and then the 4th day is when you really start to see things coming together. Okay, so what does this plan look like? On your first night, you're all set to make a change. The first thing you think about doing is having a 15-minute bedtime, a 15-minute later bedtime. And so again, remember, if you do choose to do an approach like this, you have to make sure you're asking your baby to do what's most fair. And so it's really going to be helpful if your baby's circadian rhythm is already regular. So if you need to go back and check on webinars about establishing the appropriate schedule for your baby, asking your baby to sleep the appropriate amount of time, not too long in the crib. But assuming you have a regular bedtime, on the first night, put your baby to bed about 15 minutes later. This increases your baby's sleep pressure or sleepiness without making your baby crazy overtired. Because if you think about it, with any plan, any intervention, whether you do something slower, like our Trading Down Sleep Association's approach that we have a popular webinar, whether you do something like this, or whether you do any one of the other strategies that we offer in between, the bottom line is you're asking your baby to make a change. And change can be hard. And so you want to anticipate that your baby will resist the change as long as she can, right? So she will try to resist that sleep pressure, that sleepiness, until she just can't anymore and she has to fall asleep. And so you want to try to let that go. You don't know how long it's going to take your baby to fall asleep in a new way. That's something that really, we can't control. I can't make your baby sleep. I wish I could. So kind of let that go. And you're focusing more on what am I going to do during the time it's taking my baby to fall asleep in a new way. And in this particular approach, you would be doing an interval style. And so by putting your baby to bed about 15 minutes later, you're trying to shave off some of the time it's going to take your baby to actually achieve sleep without, of course, making her super overtired. Okay, so you do your nice regular bedtime routine. You want that to be very predictable. Again, we've got webinars on bedtime routines if you're not sure by age what's most appropriate for your baby or toddler. And then your child goes into their crib awake and aware. At this point, you would actually leave the room. Now, let me just stop here for a second. Remember I said I'm going to be, talking to you about modifications. If you have a baby who's really hooked on a sleep association like nursing, for example, or sucking on a bottle, you might choose to spend an interim period working on exchanging that sleep association for something like rocking. And we have a webinar on that. Of course, there's a webinar for that, where you might go check out the webinar on how to change a nursing to sleep association. You might choose to spend a few days transitioning your baby into getting comfortable with, say, rocking in your arms, for example. And that you can then work into this interval plan. Okay, so instead of making such a huge change all at once. So you put your baby into their crib when they're still aware. And we say aware. Now, a lot of you probably know the popular phrase, drowsy but awake, drowsy but awake. We like to say awake and aware because it really is that level of awareness that your baby knows that he's leaving your arms and he's going into his crib. And it's important because sometimes parents actually rock their babies into early states of sleep, which can appear like wakefulness. And so you just make sure that you're not rocking your baby into light sleep, that you're actually putting your baby down when he's still aware. Okay? And then you would leave the room. If you wanted to modify this to a slower transition, you might choose to actually stay in the room with your baby, but maybe you would go sit in a chair near the door or sit in a chair that's a few feet away from the crib. If or when your baby started to cry or fuss for you, the first thing you would actually do is you'd wait. Now, you can, turn to X page in whatever book and follow, their exact minute progression. The truth is the number of minutes you're waiting doesn't really matter. It matters more that your delays are increasing, but we like to start people nice and slow. Because it gives you you can build from there. So typically what we'll say is when, if your baby starts to fuss, just hang back for a minute. You're sort of giving your baby a chance, let's see, can you settle, can you soothe, can you find a new way to do some baby-led soothing and see if your baby can calm himself. If he can't, you're going to go back into the room and you're going to offer soothing. And your first option would be to go with a little less soothing. And in that approach, you would actually choose to keep your baby in his crib. This is a more traditional style. You would keep your baby in the crib and you would do just some crib-side soothing, like a quick cheek rub or tummy rub or head stroke. And so you're just sort of reassuring your baby that you're here. You're sort of reassuring yourself that, everything's fine, your baby's not sick, didn't have a poopy diaper, nothing's going on, but you're keeping it very brief. Option 2 for more soothing would be if you choose to actually pick your baby up, hold, calm, bounce, rock, sway, do some more hands-on soothing and really get your baby nice and calm and settled. Because if you can envision sort of an option 1, by keeping your baby in the crib and doing crib-side soothing, if your baby's really not cool with that, your baby might be crying. And for some parents, that's okay. Some parents say, you know what? I'm okay with it because I know it's going to be faster and this is really what we need right now. And I'm right here with my baby and I'm rubbing his tummy and stroking his cheek and I'm okay with that. And other parents say, I really need to have everyone have a break. I really want him to stop crying and I want to pick him up and hold him and rock him. Remember where I said you might find it helpful to spend some sort of prep nights working on changing a nursing or sucking to sleep association. And this is where that becomes important. Because if you don't have any means for soothing your baby other than sucking, it will be hard for you at these intervals when you're visiting your baby to be able to pick him up and rock him or hold him, and for your baby to find that comforting. So you just want to make sure going into this that you do have an effective soothing approach. If that's the, if you would like to go with the option 2 here, which is more soothing at each visit. If you prefer to go with option 1, less soothing, keeping your baby in the crib, sort of the old, rip the Band-Aid off approach, then that you wouldn't have to necessarily spend that time learning a new soothing. Okay, so in any case, when your soothing style is over, and you would place your baby back into the crib. If you'd been picking him up, he goes back into the crib. When he's still aware, you're going to make sure you're staying engaged, and your baby does have to go into the crib aware. You would then leave the room again. Okay. If your baby is continuing to cry, or if your baby begins to cry again, first thing you do is hang back, look at the clock, wait for 2 minutes. Again, you can increase your delays at your comfort level, but this is just sort of our standard first night, nice and slow, increasing by 1 minute. Return to the room, spend about 30 seconds or so. Sure, you can spend longer. There are always modifications. You can spend longer in the room with your baby. That's no problem. The biggest thing is that you're making sure you put your baby back down into the crib to try again when he's still awake and aware. And so you do the same soothing you did on the first visit, either leaving your baby in the crib and soothing from the crib side, or picking up and soothing, and then leaving the room. And you can just sort of see how this goes. You're going to continue increasing those delays by 1 minute until your baby falls asleep. So 2 minutes becomes 3 minutes, becomes 4 minutes. And remember, you've got to talk to yourself, because you got to get inside your own head and sort of tell yourself, okay, his sleep pressure is rising, his sleep hormones are rising, and you know that will cause your baby to fall asleep. Okay, that's sleep biology. It's sleep pressure, sleep hormones causes your baby to conk out. Okay, and how long that happens generally on the first night, it's about 40 to 60 minutes. And so you would want to anticipate that, you could be spending quite some time working on this. That would be normal for the first night. On your second night, and by the way, I'm applying this to bedtime, but of course, depending on the age of your baby, it might be appropriate for you to apply this at other times of the night as well. But just be very careful that you are asking your baby to do something that he's really old enough to achieve. On your second night, you're going to use that same bedtime. It's about 15 minutes later than your typical bedtime. You're going to use that bedtime on night 2. And the only change here will be the check-in scheme, which will increase. So, for example, you do your bedtime routine, place your baby into the crib awake, and head out the door, or go sit in your spot by the door if you prefer to stay in the room. And if when your baby starts to fuss, you're going to delay a little bit more than you did on the first night. So, for example, instead of waiting 1 minute, maybe you start waiting for 2. And then you go back in, offer your baby that soothing, just like you did on the first night, and then you head out again. And this time you wait a little longer. If on the first night you waited for 2 minutes, maybe this time you wait for 4 minutes. And so maybe your check-in scheme on night 2 is something like 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, etc. Okay, so you're just, same premise, you're just increasing the time spent in the crib. Night 3, more of the same, continue increasing those waiting periods. If you've been doing higher soothing, like picking up, rocking, holding, bouncing, you might start to taper that a bit. Maybe you try to do a little bit less pickup. Maybe you try to do more soothing from the side of the crib so that you're starting to taper yourself out. The goal here with any intervention is ultimately to teach your baby how to fall asleep on her own, so that when she wakes up in the night, which is totally normal, your baby will wake up between sleep cycles, and in the second half of the night, that may be as often as every 60 to 90 minutes. And so unless you don't mind your baby calling you to help her go back to sleep every 60 to 90 minutes, it will be helpful if she knows how to do it on her own. so that when it's not time for a feeding in the night and she's waking up at those sleep cycles, she knows how to go back to sleep. So that's sort of the whole, ultimate goal. Even with the super slow plans, we tend, if unless parents are preferring to be in the room or, responding to their baby ultra frequently overnight, the goal is to get your baby sleeping on her own, falling asleep on her own, so she can then repeat that in the night. Just a note here too, it's always important that you begin an intervention at bedtime first. It really wouldn't be fair if you rocked or nursed or held your baby to sleep at bedtime and then at 2 a.m. said, oh, I'm too tired for that, forget it, you're on your own. And then you applied a technique like this in the middle of the night only. That typically would not, it probably wouldn't work well, and it wouldn't really be a fair expectation for your baby. Okay, so you continue to repeat the increased waiting periods with your soothing so that ultimately your baby gets used to falling asleep without you going in at all. All right, so some common questions. When should you start this? And we reviewed the age a little bit. 4 months is about the earliest you could think about trying at bedtime. 5 months, it would typically go more smoothly, and 6 months would be full night. 5.5 to 6 months, and this is all from due date, 5.5 to 6 months would be when you could begin for naps. Always start at bedtime first. If your bedtime is going really smoothly, and if if your baby's falling asleep beautifully on her own at bedtime and your trouble spot is in the middle of the night, you might be in a situation of having to apply this for the first time in the middle of the night. But that would be that would be a bit less common. I think there's a question about the age limit. How old can you do this with your child? Really, any baby or toddler who's in the crib. This would look a little bit different. You certainly can do a style like this for older children who are out of the crib, but that would look a little different. So what we're talking about here is really any baby who's in the crib. If your baby is going through some major developmental milestones, there would be modifications that I would do for this. If your baby is going through some type of major separation anxiety or huge life transition, or if your baby has a lot of crib anxiety, or you have a lot of changes to make, like for example, you've been co-sleeping for a year and now you're looking to transition your baby into her own room. There are reasons why I might not jump to this as a first approach, where you might have to do a little bit of prep work, sort of setting the stage for success first. So this just on its own isn't always the first place I would go with a family. But sometimes, if you have a lot of layers, a lot of balls up in the air, that's why sometimes a sleep consult can be helpful. How long should your intervals be? Again, doesn't really matter. It just matters that they're increasing. 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, etc. becomes 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. becomes 3, 6, 9, 12. You're just increasing on each night. Some parents say, well, what if I feel maxed out? I have parents say to me, I'm okay. I know there might be some frustration, but, I'm okay with maybe 5 minutes at the most. And that can be okay. If you get on your first night, if you do 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, 5 minute, and then you feel maxed out there, you can stay at 5 minute, 5 minute, 5 minute, 5 minute. That would be fine. The trouble becomes if you do 5 minute, 5 minute, 5 minute every single night, you're going to get stuck in a 5 minute rut. Your baby will learn quite quickly, okay, just a little longer and she'll be back. And so you'll sort of be spinning your wheels. So, if you get to a max out point on one night, then the next night you do just need to sort of raise the bar a little bit. So the next night maybe you would do 2, 4, 6, 8, 8, 8, 8, for example. But again, these are modifications that you can sort of speed things up or slow it down at your comfort level. Switching caregivers, switching parents, that's fine at different parts of the night. Some books that you read say one responder for the full night. That's often not practical for a lot of families. And so the biggest thing is that you can switch caregivers. For example, one person might be in charge of bedtime and one person might be in charge of 2 a.m. But what you want to try not to do is say, okay, I'll be on for 10 minutes, then you're on for 10 minutes, then I'm on for 10 minutes. So you want to try not to trade back and forth within one set of intervals. And then I just, again, want to really drive home, what about hunger, feedings, age? You have to make sure that you have addressed all other areas of sleep, that you're not trying to do this through a hunger for your baby, through a habitual hunger cue. You would always, make sure that your baby's feedings are, you're confident with the times your baby needs to eat overnight. If you're trying to reduce any feedings, you're not trying to plow through them cold turkey using this approach, that you're weaning down your feedings. We've got a webinar for that, so that you sort of map out your night before you begin this, and you're sort of saying, okay, at what time am I doing intervals? At what time am I doing a weaning? At what time am I doing a feeding? And again, these are all things that you get in a sleep consult. And then take into consideration your child's age. At what time of the night is it appropriate for you to be applying this intervention? Is it just bedtime? Is it half the night? Is it full night? This also depends a little bit on what your goals are. Some parents just want to get, like one long stretch, 5 or 6 hours, so they can be confident in putting their baby down and maybe being able to go out together or have a sitter, but then they don't really care the rest of the night. They're open to, feeding on demand or, bed sharing or whatever their family style is. So, just think about your family goals. Timing in the middle of the night. So another question that comes up is, okay, well, when my baby wakes in the middle of the night, let's say it's 1 a.m. and it's not time for a feeding, and let's say your baby's 9 months old, I know it's just time for him to be asleep. What do I do about those intervals? Do I pick up where I left off? Do I start over? The answer is it doesn't really matter, except to the extent that, how ambitious are you feeling? If your baby has fallen asleep at bedtime and you find yourself having to do some more intervals in the middle of the night, you can either pick up where you left off. That would be, a faster style approach. For example, if you left off at an 8-minute interval, you can pick up from there at 1 a.m. Or you could start back at your lowest interval of the night. For example, restart at 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes. Either way is fine. Just be consistent within each night in your approach. And then how long does it take for your baby to fall asleep? If this is done under the right, in the right schedule, the right timing, the right environment. I didn't actually mention environment, but remember your baby's sleep environment is essential. It's not going to be fair to ask your baby to fall asleep in, using a technique like this if your baby's sleep environment is not conducive to sleep. So again, if everything is right, timing, environment, schedule, bedtime routine is predictable, your baby's going into a crib awake, it does typically take about 40 to 60 minutes on the first night for your baby to fall asleep. The second night is often a little bit shorter than that. Not always, but often about 20 to 40 minutes. And the third night does typically become even shorter than that. So, but again, you wouldn't try to micromanage each night. It's not like each night is always a perfect improvement on the last. You sometimes have a bit of back and forth. But over the course of a week to 10 days, you're looking for very clear signs of improvement. In the middle of the night, your time to sleep could be much more erratic and unpredictable. So, I can tell you, I don't promise, but 40 to 60 minutes is a pretty good estimation for bedtime. But in the middle of the night, it's very hard to predict how long it will be for your baby to fall back asleep, because it depends on what state of sleep was your baby in when he woke up. What time of the night it is, how much of the sleep pressure that your baby's sleep drive is remaining. It's always going to be more difficult for you to apply a technique like this, any technique, in the last third of the night when your baby is doing more REM sleep and when your baby has lower sleep pressure. Okay, so expect the first third to half of your night to come together quite quickly, and the second half to that last third of your night to take a little longer to come around. Okay, so I hope that for those of you who were curious about an approach like this or who've heard about an approach like this, I hate to see parents apply this incorrectly. And so I guess that's the biggest take home, that we know that different families need and want different techniques, and that every family does what feels right to them. I mean, hey, we're all just trying to do what we think is best for our babies. Um, and so if you do feel like an approach like this, a bit of a faster style approach is for you, I just encourage you to make sure that you're doing it under the right circumstances, with the right, appropriate expectations for your baby, your family, and your baby's temperament. Nancy, did I miss that? Oh, good.
Yep. Meg, I have to tell you, we had,
Sure, that
I
sounds
think we had
great.
28 people at max. There's 22 people in the room right now, and 14 questions on topic. And it's after 12:30. So my proposal is is to give you one question or scenario to comment
Yep.
on, but that we save these questions, and next week we push our topic back and do
Hmm.
frequently asked questions about interval style. What do you think about that idea?
Mm.
Because all of these
Yeah.
questions are very valid, and I think they are representative of frequently asked questions, and there's no way that we can get to them today with the situation of time. Um, the comment I have is look at Laura right in the chit chat room, and she's struggling with her child. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's starting to crawl. So I'm going to guess he's, 9 or 10-ish months. And she says that she wants DJ to sleep in his crib. But as soon as he realizes he's been left in the crib, he screams and screams and screams until he's picked up and held. So she's
Yeah.
co-sleeping on the bedroom floor, trying to have him learn to sleep next to her
Yeah,
without being
so,
held. And he
for
wakes up in the
babies
middle of the
who
night and
have
starts
been
to
used
crawl.
to
And
a
now
great
she's
deal
not
of
sure if she should
co-sleeping,
work
room
on trading
sharing,
down or just let him
or,
cry. And she's
even if
toying
they've
with a
been in
sleep
their own room,
concept.
just
And of
having
course, I
frequent
said that,
intervention
this is
and have some
exactly,
sleep
can you explain
associations.
how those may not be
Sometimes,
the only two
and it sounds like
choices,
in this
or
case, like
either of
if her
those
baby
choices
has
may
some
be
crib
appropriate,
anxiety and he's
but
screaming, I would
implemented in a less
probably
effective
add a little
way, and
happy crib
how
time,
some
lovingly
targeted
created by Erin
support
Evans, who
can flip
co-leads
that
a sleep team
situation
with me, and
around.
it's a great technique for building a positive association for a baby in the crib, and that would be something that we would incorporate into your bedtime routine, a way that we could help teach your baby what it feels like to be soothed from the side of the crib and to become comforted by that, and then having the ability to do that then sometimes makes it a little easier to continue on with trading down sleep associations if that feels right to you. Um, or if you're just feeling like the pace is too slow and you're exhausted, we certainly could move to something a little bit faster, but it doesn't have to be an out of room strategy like an interval approach, which is what I just described, walking in and out of the room. There are in room strategies that would keep you with your baby, that would sometimes feel a little more appealing. It could still be a structured approach like the interval technique I just described, but we could keep you in the room. I sort of alluded to that, like maybe we could keep you in a chair, keep you close to the crib. So with all of these techniques, these are techniques you can read about in books, but we can, knowing the principles of sleep, we can combine them, we can merge them, we can taper them, we can make them fit your family and your baby. So for Laura Mish, I'm not sure I would jump straight to intervals for her. There are, I think, a few things that I would have her do first. And then I'm not saying I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but there are probably a few things that I would have her try first.
Thank you. And one final question for you.
Oh, good question.
Meg, of course,
So
as many of
she's
you
talking
know, is a
about night
twin
sleep, not
and is one
naps.
of
Is that
our
right?
multiple specialists. We have two
Okay.
sleep team members that are
So
specializing with
I
working with
love the
families with
whole,
twins. And I think we have at
if
least
your
three
goal is to have your
moms,
twins
four
be together,
moms
sort of
here
that's like your
today with
long-term
twins.
goal, then
And one is
usually
asking if you're
if you
going
do
to
an approach
try
like this, it
an
is going to be
intervals
better if you
approach
put them
like this.
together from the
Would you
get-go.
separate the
And
twins? Would
you
you do
have a
one
special
child at a
challenge when you
time?
have twins because
How would you
one
address
will
that
likely make
scenario?
the other, and so you have to deal with that family of a single baby wouldn't. But yeah, you
I
can
think
do
so.
your bedtime routine with both twins, and you can place each one of them into their crib awake. And then you might essentially be walking back and forth from both crib sides, or if you leave the room for a brief period of time, you walk first to one baby, do your soothing, you walk then to the next baby, do your soothing, and you step out. That's if you're doing, sort of a zone, like we say, a zone defense. If you have two caregivers and you're doing more man-to-man, you can have one caregiver responding to one baby, and so then you can both go in at the same time. One caregiver goes to one baby, one caregiver goes to the other baby, do your soothing, check out of the room, meet back in the hall together, watch your clocks, and so you can be responding together. But yes, if it's at nighttime, I have no problem keeping twins in the same room. I encourage it a lot of times unless they're real extenuating circumstances. I might say something different for naps depending on the trouble, if you're having trouble, but for night, yes.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. I see we had so many new people, and we're using a lot of terms and referring to a lot of previous webinar information. There's a lot of questions about things like, how do you know when to feed at night, when they're truly hungry, and things like that. And so I would encourage folks that are newer to the sleep webinars to check out the particular webinars called Sleep and Nap Patterns by Age and Stage. And we break those up into age and developmental segments so that you get a sense of the amount of sleep in a 24-hour period, what feeding patterns could possibly be like, nap transitions moving from no concise naps to moving into 3 to 4 naps to 3 to 2 to 1 nap transition, things like that. So that gives you some grounding. And then usually those webinars refer to other webinars. So if you need to begin to gently reduce nighttime feedings, or if you need to be working on daytime nap, if it's important to you that your baby work on napping in the crib, we have particular webinars on that. How to get into a routine if your baby is younger. And you'll find that many of the webinars do have a very nurturing approach. And this is, I think, one of the first webinars that we really ran where we're talking about a faster method. And the reason that we decided to do this is because some parents choose these types of methods, and we work with families in a variety of circumstances. And sometimes I think people think that we only work with attachment parenting, co-sleeping, long, slow, nurturing approaches. And I think we do focus and specialize in those, but we deal with a variety of situations. Okay, So join us back next week. We're going to talk about the questions that an intervals type approach bring up, and I will save the questions from this week, and if you are back next week, we'll ask your question. So if you didn't save your own question, I have it, but I'm sure we'll get lots more questions next week. Please help us by spreading the word about our webinars.
Thanks, everyone.
On Thursday, the breastfeeding webinar topic is going to be World Breastfeeding Week celebration, which means that all of the nursing and breastfeeding support products are 20% off, and I will give you a rundown on what I think are the most helpful products to have or to consider. So that will be on Thursday, and I hope everybody has a wonderful week and happy nurturing and a good night's sleep.